Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you the most heartwarming and inspiring tales from around the world. Today, we share the extraordinary story of Maximum, a loyal German shepherd whose courage and instincts not only uncovered a sinister plot but also saved a young man's life and united an entire community. Set in the tranquil town of Harbour Heights, this tale reminds us of the power of trust, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds we share with our animal companions. Subscribe to our channel and join us as we dive into Max's incredible journey in today's story. Harbour Heights, nestled along a quiet stretch of the eastern coast, was a town where life moved at a tranquil pace. Its historic landmarks, lined with ancient oak trees, told tales of generations past. One of these landmarks was Harbour Hills Cemetery, a sprawling resting ground for those who had come before us, their stories woven into the fabric of the town. At the heart of the cemetery stood a loyal guardian, Maximum, a retired German shepherd from the local police K9 unit. Max wasn't just any dog. His sharp instincts and years of service had earned him a reputation among law enforcement as an exceptional partner. After retirement, Max found his second calling at Harbour Hills, watching over the cemetery grounds. Under the care of John Harper, the cemetery's groundskeeper, Max had a new purpose. The bond between them was as natural as the sunrise, a quiet understanding shared through countless walks among the headstones. I remember the October morning when everything changed. The air carried an unusual chill, and the mist clung to the gravestones like a shroud. I arrived at the cemetery early that day to visit the resting place of my late aunt. It was a ritual I kept every few weeks, a time to reflect and reconnect with memories. As I walked past the wrought iron gates, I noticed Maximum. He wasn't calmly patrolling the grounds as he usually did. His stance was rigid, his tail low but twitching. He barked, a deep, guttural sound that echoed across the cemetery. John stood nearby, his weathered face creased with worry. He called out to Maximum, but the dog wouldn't budge. His attention was locked on a particular spot near the newer section of the graves. Something was different about Max that day, and John could feel it too. Max never barks without a reason, John said to me, his voice tinged with unease. He's trying to tell us something. Curiosity mingled with apprehension as I approached the spot Max was so fixated on. The grave was simple, marked with a modest headstone bearing the name Ethan Miller. No flowers adorned it, no signs of a recent visit. The date on the marker seemed oddly recent, though, as if the grave had only just been made. John frowned, pulling out his logbook, a meticulous record of every burial and ceremony conducted at Harbour Hills. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, flipping through the pages. "There's no record of this plot being used. It was empty just a few days ago." Max began pawing at the ground, his claws scratching against the earth with a determination that seemed almost frantic. It was as though he was driven by something beyond instinct, as if he knew something we didn't. I knelt beside him, running a hand through his thick fur in an attempt to calm him. His body was tense, his eyes unwavering. There was an urgency in his movements that sent a shiver down my spine. Just then, Sarah Collins arrived, a young police officer fresh from the academy. Sarah had been Max's training partner during her first months on the force. Their bond was still strong, and she often visited the cemetery to bring Max treats and check in on John. When she saw Max's behavior, her instincts as a cop kicked in. "Something's definitely not right here," Sarah said. Crouching beside Maximum, she glanced at the disturbed soil and the unrecorded grave. "We need to look into this." As the morning fog began to lift, the scene grew even stranger. The earth around the grave appeared freshly disturbed, but it lacked the care and precision typical of John's work. Sarah pulled out her phone and called her superior, Sergeant Robert Matthews, to report the situation. Max's agitation grew as they waited for him to arrive. When the sergeant arrived, his experienced eyes took in the scene with a practiced seriousness. Max was still digging, his paws now raw from the effort. But he wouldn't stop. There was a look of determination in his gaze. One that seemed to say he wouldn't rest until the truth was uncovered. Sergeant Matthews authorized a closer inspection of the site, and arrangements were quickly made to investigate further. As we stood there, a sense of unease settled over us. It wasn't just the unexplained grave or Max's unusual behavior, it was the weight of the unknown, pressing down on all of us. I found myself thinking about the loyalty of this dog. His unwavering commitment to his duty even in retirement. There was something deeply moving about his refusal to abandon the grave. As if he understood the gravity of what lay beneath better than any of us. John stayed close to Maximum, his hand resting on the dog's back as if to comfort him. He's saved lives before, John said quietly, almost to himself. He knows when something's wrong. Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. Max was always the best in training. It's like he sees things we don't. As the hours passed, Max's determination didn't waver. His devotion to uncovering the mystery was both inspiring and haunting. It reminded me of the depth of loyalty and love animals are capable of, their ability to sense emotions and situations that we humans often overlook. Max's actions that day weren't just about instinct. They were about something deeper. Something almost spiritual. By the time the investigation began in earnest, the sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the cemetery. The tension was palpable. A quiet anticipation of what was to come. I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was a turning point, not just for Max or the cemetery, but for all of us who stood there that morning. What we would find beneath that grave, I knew, would change everything. The day after Max's extraordinary behavior, the air around Harbour Hills Cemetery felt heavier, as though the ground itself was holding its breath. News of the unmarked grave spread quickly through Harbour Heights, though only a few people truly understood the gravity of the situation. The cemetery, normally a place of solemn quiet, had become the center of speculation. By mid-morning, the site was cordoned off, and a small team of investigators gathered around the grave. Sarah stood near Maximum, her presence a reassurance to the restless dog, who had refused to leave the area overnight. His raw paws had been cleaned and wrapped by John, but his alertness remained. His gaze fixed on the disturbed soil as though willing the truth to surface. "It's not just the grave," Sarah said quietly to John. "Something bigger is going on." John nodded but didn't respond. His eyes were on the horizon, where a black SUV had just slowed as it passed the cemetery gates. The same vehicle had circled the grounds several times the day before, and now it was back. It lingered for a moment before continuing down the street, its tinted windows offering no hint of the occupants inside. "Seen that one before?" Sarah asked, following his gaze. John nodded grimly. "3 times yesterday. Twice already today." Sarah's police instincts kicked into overdrive. She radioed the vehicle's description to dispatch, her voice calm but firm. "Keep an eye out," she added. Glancing at Maximum, "I don't like coincidences." The day unfolded with a strange mix of urgency and waiting. Investigators examined the grave's surface while awaiting permission for a formal exhumation. Sergeant Matthews arrived to oversee the process. His face a mask of calm authority. He spoke briefly with Sarah and John before joining the forensics team. As the hours passed, John made his rounds of the cemetery, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Yet, everywhere he looked, there seemed to be something out of place. A path near the eastern wall showed signs of recent use, though John knew it had been overgrown for months. A set of faint boot prints appeared near the maintenance shed, leading away from the cemetery's main paths. Most disturbing of all, John discovered a piece of raw meat carefully placed near the mysterious grave, as though left for Max. His hands trembled slightly as he collected the meat in a plastic bag. Using a pair of gardening gloves, he brought it to Sarah, who paled at the sight. "Someone's trying to distract him," she murmured, her hand instinctively resting on her holstered weapon. Or worse. They relocated Max to the old chapel at the edge of the cemetery. though no longer used for services. The structure was sound and provided a secure space where Max could rest. John brought food and water for the dog, as well as a first aid kit to tend to his injuries. Max allowed John to clean and bandage his paws, but his eyes never left the chapel's entrance. "He knows we're not done," John said softly, patting Max's head. The tension only deepened as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Around mid-afternoon, John noticed the black SUV again. This time, it parked just outside the cemetery gates. He hesitated, debating whether to approach. But before he could make a decision, the vehicle sped away. Its presence was unnerving, a silent reminder that someone was watching. When John returned to the chapel, he found Sarah staring intently at her phone. She had been researching the name on the mysterious grave Ethan Miller, but her search turned up nothing. No records of a burial. No obituary. No connection to Harbor Heights. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered. "It's like he doesn't exist." John sat down heavily on a nearby pew. What about the grave? Could someone have used it without authorization? Sarah shook her head. Not without leaving a trace. Everything points to this being deliberate, planned. Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Sergeant Matthews. The exhumation order had been expedited, and a forensics team would be arriving early the next morning to investigate the grave. The urgency in his voice was unmistakable. "We'll need to keep watch tonight," Sarah said after the call ended. "If someone's going to try something, it'll be before morning." John agreed, though the prospect of staying overnight filled him with unease. Harbor Hills Cemetery had always been a place of peace, but now it felt like a battleground. As they settled in for the night, Sarah positioned herself near the chapel's door, her police training keeping her alert. John remained close to Maximum, his presence a comfort to both the dog and himself. The hours crept by, the stillness of the cemetery broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of an owl. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow more menacing. Maximum, despite his exhaustion, remained watchful, his ears perking up at the slightest noise. Around midnight, Sarah noticed movement near the grave. A figure darted between the headstones, their silhouette barely visible in the moonlight. She alerted John with a sharp whisper, and they both watched as the figure approached the disturbed soil. Max growled low in his throat, his body tensing. Sarah moved quickly, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Police, stop where you are." The figure froze for a moment before bolting toward the cemetery's eastern wall. Sarah gave chase, her footsteps echoing across the grounds. John stayed back with Maximum, his heart pounding as he tried to calm the agitated dog. Though Sarah didn't catch the intruder, she returned with a crucial piece of evidence, a small metal object the figure had dropped during their escape. It was a USB drive, scuffed but intact. She held it up to the light, her expression a mix of triumph and apprehension. "This," she said, "might be the key to all of this." As the first rays of dawn broke over Harbor Hills, the cemetery felt no closer to revealing its secrets. Yet, there was a sense of resolution among the group, a determination to uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried. The dawn at Harbor Hills Cemetery brought with it a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The forensics team arrived promptly at 7. Their white vans cutting through the morning mist like ghosts. The sunlight struggled to pierce through the fog, casting long shadows across the gravestones. Maximum, as always, was already awake, his bandaged paws a reminder of the relentless night before. His gaze remained fixed on the grave, his posture tense, ready for whatever might come. Sarah Collins stood nearby, her hand resting gently on Max's head. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions about the mysterious grave, the USB drive they had recovered, and the figure that had eluded her during the night. She exchanged a brief nod with Sergeant Matthews, who had arrived early to oversee the exhumation. His expression was as stern as ever, but there was a glint of concern in his eyes. The forensics team began their work with methodical precision. Every shovel of earth was carefully removed and catalogued. Max's behavior became more intense as the process continued. His whines low but persistent. Sarah stayed close to him, her instincts telling her that his unease was warranted. "This isn't just about a grave," she muttered to herself, watching the scene unfold. "It's about something bigger." The first unusual discovery came quickly. The soil composition changed abruptly a few feet down, indicating recent disturbance. This confirmed John Harper's insistence that the grave was unauthorized. As the team dug deeper, Max's tension seemed to grow. His claws scraped the ground, and his eyes never wavered from the sight. It was as if he could sense what lay beneath. Then, the discovery that silenced everyone. The casket, when it was finally unearthed, was not the simple wooden box one might expect. It was a high-end model, the kind used in expensive funeral services. Yet its position in the grave was slightly askew, as though placed in haste. The forensics team exchanged glances, their unease evident. Max's whines turned into soft barks as the team prepared to open the casket. Sarah knelt beside him, her hand trembling slightly as she stroked his fur. "It's okay, boy," she whispered. "We'll find out what's going on." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. When the lid was lifted, the collective gasp from the onlookers seemed to echo across the cemetery. Inside lay a young man, bound and gagged, but alive. His face was pale, his body thin, but there was a faint rise and fall of his chest, a sign of life. "It's Ethan Miller," one of the forensic technicians whispered, though none of them knew how he could possibly still be alive. The scene erupted into controlled chaos. Emergency medical services, who had been on standby, rushed to the site. Ethan was carefully lifted from the casket and placed on a stretcher. His pulse was weak, but he was conscious, his eyes fluttering open as he was loaded into the ambulance. Max's demeanor shifted immediately. The frantic energy that had consumed him for days seemed to dissipate. He sat back on his haunches, his eyes following the stretcher as it was wheeled away. Sarah knelt beside him again, her voice soft. "You did it. Maximum. You saved him." The forensics team, now more determined than ever, resumed their examination of the grave. It didn't take long to find the next clue. Tucked into the lining of the casket was a sealed flash drive, wrapped in waterproof material. It was so well hidden that it might never have been found without Max's relentless insistence on digging. Sergeant Matthews took the drive, his expression grim. "This just keeps getting stranger," he said, slipping it into an evidence bag. "We'll need to get this analyzed immediately." Meanwhile, Sarah stayed close to Maximum, watching as the ambulance carrying Ethan disappeared down the road. She couldn't shake the image of his face, pale but alive, and the thought of what might have happened if Max hadn't persisted. As the morning wore on, the cemetery seemed to grow quieter, as if it too was recovering from the shock of the discovery. Yet there was no time to rest. The black SUV reappeared, this time parked across the street. Through her binoculars, Sarah could make out two figures inside, their eyes fixed on the activity in the cemetery. When they realized they had been spotted, the vehicle sped away. Sarah's heart raced as she relayed the information to Sergeant Matthews. "They're watching us," she said. "Whoever's behind this, they're not done." Matthews nodded, his jaw set. "We'll increase security around the cemetery and the hospital. If they've gone this far, they won't give up easily." John Harper, who had been unusually quiet during the exhumation, approached Sarah. His face was pale, and he held a camera in his hands. "I've been documenting everything," he said, his voice trembling. "And I think you should see this." The photographs he showed her were chilling. They captured various individuals conducting surveillance of the cemetery over the past few days. Some were blurry, taken from a distance, but others were clear enough to identify features. None of the faces were familiar, and their presence only deepened the mystery. As the day drew to a close, Sarah found herself sitting in the chapel with Max at her feet. The events of the day played over in her mind like a film she couldn't pause. The sight of Ethan alive in that casket. The hidden flash drive. The black SUV, all of it painted a picture of a conspiracy far more intricate than she could have imagined. Max let out a soft sigh. His body finally relaxing. Sarah reached down to scratch behind his ears. Her voice filled with quiet admiration. "You've always been the best. Maximum. I don't know how you knew. But you did." The sun began to set, casting the cemetery in hues of amber and rose. It was a scene that should have brought peace. Yet it only underscored the weight of what lay ahead. Harbor Hills Cemetery, once a place of quiet reflection, had become the center of something far greater than any of them could have foreseen. And the story, it seemed, was only beginning. The evening after Ethan Miller's miraculous rescue, Harbor Heights remained cloaked in an uneasy calm. At the hospital, Ethan was under heavy security, his condition still critical but stable. Meanwhile, Sergeant Matthews and his team focused their attention on the flash drive Max had uncovered. The contents of the drive, analyzed by the cybercrimes unit, revealed a chilling plot that stretched far beyond the quiet cemetery. Sarah Collins paced the length of her living room, her mind racing with the implications of what they had learned. The drive contained encrypted files linked to a group called the Shadows. This shadowy organization wasn't just involved in Ethan's burial, they were orchestrating something far larger. Their target? The global financial infrastructure. The Shadows' plan was methodical and terrifying in its ambition. Using a backdoor into the AI security systems developed by Ethan's father, Martin Miller, a tech magnate known for revolutionizing digital security, they intended to create a shadow financial network. This network would operate invisibly, allowing them to siphon funds, manipulate markets, and destabilize entire economies without detection. Sarah clenched her fists as she processed the information. It wasn't just Harbor Heights at risk. The implications were global. The cemetery, it seemed, was more than a random hiding place for Ethan. It was a key location in the Shadows' intricate scheme. That night, Sarah joined Sergeant Matthews and the cybercrimes team at the police department's secure lab. The lead technician, Amanda Rivera, was methodically decrypting the files, her face illuminated by the soft glow of multiple monitors. "This isn't just about Ethan," Amanda said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "The Shadows have been embedding themselves into critical infrastructure for years. The cemetery was strategically chosen. It's directly above a central fiber optic hub that connects major financial institutions across the East Coast." Sarah leaned forward, her brow furrowed. They buried Ethan there to cover their tracks, or worse, to use him as leverage. Amanda nodded. "And it gets worse. The files indicate they've compromised parts of the global banking system already. If we don't stop them, their midnight deadline isn't just a random target. It's when they plan to activate the network and seize control." Midnight. The word echoed in Sarah's mind like a drumbeat. They had less than 48 hours to unravel a plot that had likely taken years to plan. Meanwhile, back at Harbor Hills Cemetery, John Harper sat alone in his small office, reviewing his meticulous records. His photographs of the surveillance activity around the cemetery painted a clearer picture of just how carefully the Shadows had orchestrated their movements. Vehicles, unfamiliar faces, subtle patterns, everything pointed to a group that had been hiding in plain sight. John's thoughts were interrupted by Maximum, who rested by his feet but perked up at the faint sound of a car engine. John glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. Far too late for visitors. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, Max following close behind. The cemetery was eerily quiet. The only sound the crunch of John's boots on the gravel path. Then he saw it, a black SUV parked near the maintenance shed, its engine idling. As he approached, the vehicle's headlights suddenly flared to life, and it sped off into the night. Max barked furiously, his injured paws forgotten as he chased after it. But the vehicle was gone before John could get a closer look. The next morning, Sarah, Sergeant Matthews, and Amanda returned to the cemetery to meet with John. He showed them the photographs he had taken and described the SUV's visit. Max sat at his side, his keen eyes scanning the grounds as though expecting another intrusion. "The shadows aren't just watching us," John said. "They're moving. I can feel it." Amanda reviewed John's records carefully. One photograph, taken 3 months earlier, caught her attention. It showed a team of workers installing new fiber optic cables near the cemetery's eastern wall. Their van bore the logo of a legitimate network installation company. But something about their presence felt out of place. "These aren't regular technicians," Amanda said. "They're too close to the cemetery's hub. If they were part of the shadows, they could have installed backdoors into the system right under our noses." Sarah's jaw tightened. "We need to track them down. If they compromised the hub, they could have set the stage for everything that's happening now." John suddenly remembered something, a business card left behind by one of the workers during the installation. He retrieved it from his office, and Amanda cross-referenced the company's details. The results were alarming. The company had no legitimate records. Its registration traced back to a shell corporation linked to the shadows. "It's not just the cemetery," Amanda said. "The shadows are using every connection point in Harbor Heights to prepare for their attack. And they've been planning this for a long time." Later that day, Sarah and Sergeant Matthews convened a strategy meeting with local and federal authorities. The shadows weren't just a local threat anymore, they had positioned themselves as an international one. The priority was clear: secure the fiber optic hub beneath Harbor Hills Cemetery and identify any other vulnerable points in the network. As the meeting concluded, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. She returned to the cemetery to check on John and Maximum, who had resumed their rounds. The loyal dog's focus had shifted to the old maintenance shed, his behavior growing more intense as he sniffed around its perimeter. Sarah followed Max's lead, shining her flashlight into the shadows of the shed. She noticed faint scuff marks on the ground and the faint outline of boot prints leading to the eastern wall. "Maximum, what is it?" she asked softly. Kneeling beside him, the dog let out a low growl, his eyes fixed on a particular section of the wall. John joined them, his brow furrowed. "There's something behind there," he said. "I've worked here for 15 years, and I've never seen that wall disturbed." Sarah stood, her heart pounding. "We need to check it out." The pieces were beginning to come together, but the clock was ticking. Midnight was approaching, and with it, the shadows planned to bring the world's financial systems to their knees. The discovery behind the cemetery's eastern wall sent ripples of urgency through the team, with Max's unwavering instincts leading the way. Sarah, John, and Sergeant Matthews prepared for what lay beyond. The forensics team arrived with specialized equipment, carefully dismantling the false wall to reveal a hidden passageway. The tunnel that emerged was more than old stonework, it was a modernized network, humming with faint vibrations and lit by concealed lead strips. Sarah stood at the edge of the opening, flashlight in hand. "This isn't just a tunnel," she said, her voice low. "It's infrastructure. They've been building this for years." Max moved ahead cautiously, his injured paws forgotten in his focused determination. His nose twitched as he scanned the air, his body language alert and methodical. Sarah followed, her heart pounding as the tunnel walls seemed to close in around them. Behind her, John held his flashlight steady, his face etched with a mix of curiosity and fear. As they progressed deeper, the air grew cooler, and the hum of machinery became louder. It wasn't long before they reached a reinforced steel door. Amanda Rivera, the cybercrimes specialist, joined them, her portable terminal slung over her shoulder. She knelt beside the door's keypad, her fingers moving swiftly across the interface. "This isn't just any security system," Amanda murmured. "This is cutting edge. Whoever built this had access to resources we can't even imagine." With Max standing watch, Amanda worked her magic. bypassing the security protocols and gaining access. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing what lay beyond, a sprawling underground command center. A blend of sleek technology and makeshift ingenuity. Rows of monitors displayed live feeds from various locations around Harbor Heights, while others showed lines of code scrolling in real time. The air buzzed with the hum of servers and the faint glow of fiber optic cables snaking along the walls. The team stepped inside cautiously, the magnitude of what they were seeing dawning on them. Max moved through the room with purpose, his nose leading him to a specific corner where a concealed panel caught his attention. Sarah followed, gently prying it open to reveal another hidden compartment filled with smaller servers and data storage devices. "This isn't just a command center," Amanda said, her voice shaking slightly. "This is the nerve center for their entire operation." John stood near a workstation displaying a map of the city. Red dots marked key locations, banks, data hubs, and critical infrastructure points. The connections between them formed a web of vulnerabilities that the shadows had been exploiting. "They've mapped everything," John whispered. "They know exactly where to strike." As Amanda began transferring data from the servers, Sarah explored further into the chamber, Max close at her heels. In the center of the room stood a device that immediately drew her attention, a quantum computer. Its sleek design and faintly glowing core seemed almost otherworldly, a testament to the Shadow's technological prowess. "This is it," Amanda said, joining her. "This is what they're using to control the network. If we can dismantle this, we can shut them down." Max suddenly growled, his ears perking up. His focus shifted to a second door on the far side of the room. Sarah followed his gaze, her grip tightening on her flashlight. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. As she approached the door, it slid open to reveal another, smaller chamber. Inside, Ethan Miller's face appeared on a monitor, his features pale but resolute. The video feed showed him sitting upright in a hospital bed, guarded by 2 officers. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized what the shadows had been doing. "They've been monitoring him," she said, her voice trembling. "He wasn't just leverage. He's a part of this." Amanda stepped inside, her expression grim as she examined the equipment. "They've tied him into their network. His father's AI protocols, they're using Ethan's biometrics to activate the system. Without him, they can't launch their plan." Suddenly, Max barked sharply, his body tense. Sarah turned to see movement on one of the monitors, a live feed of the cemetery grounds. Figures in dark clothing moved swiftly between the gravestones, their purpose clear. "They're coming," Sarah said. "They know we're here." Sergeant Matthews's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got movement topside. Multiple individuals heading your way. Get out of there now." Amanda worked quickly, securing as much data as she could before pulling her equipment away from the servers. Sarah called for Maximum, who was already by her side, his sharp eyes scanning every shadow for danger. John moved toward the exit, his hands shaking as he held the flashlight steady. As they began retreating, the hum of the quantum computer suddenly grew louder, and the monitors flashed red. Amanda froze, her eyes darting across the screens. "They've activated a failsafe. The system is locking down." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, her voice urgent. "It means we're running out of time," Amanda replied. "They're moving to phase 2, and if we don't stop them, this network will go live." The team raced back through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Max led the way, his instincts guiding them safely through the labyrinthine passage. Behind them, the hum of the command center grew fainter, but its threat loomed larger than ever. When they emerged into the night, the cemetery was alive with activity. Officers moved between the gravestones, securing the perimeter. Sarah's gaze fell on the hospital's distant glow, her thoughts consumed by Ethan. He was at the heart of this, and now it was up to them to keep him safe and dismantle the Shadow's plan. Max let out a soft growl, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The black SUV had returned, parked just beyond the gates. Its presence was a stark reminder that the fight was far from over. "We're not done yet," Sarah said, her voice steady. She knelt beside Maximum, her hand resting on his back. "But we'll finish this. Together." As the SUV sped away into the night, Sarah felt a surge of determination. The shadows might have built an empire of deceit and control, but they hadn't counted on the loyalty of a dog like Max or the relentless resolve of the people who stood by him. The cemetery at Harbor Hills had become an unlikely command center for a battle that spanned far beyond its quiet grounds. By the time the team regrouped, the gravity of their mission weighed heavily on everyone. Midnight was less than 24 hours away, and with each passing hour, the Shadows' plans came closer to fruition. The discovery of their underground command center had provided critical clues. But the stakes were higher than ever. Sergeant Matthews gathered the team in the old chapel, its stained glass windows casting fractured light across the room. Maps of Harbor Heights and the underground tunnels were spread across a large table, dotted with red pins marking key points in the Shadows network. Max sat beside Sarah, his ears alert as if he too understood the importance of the moment. Amanda Rivera stood at the head of the table, her laptop open, its screen filled with cascading lines of code. "The Shadows system is more advanced than we thought," she began, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "The quantum computer is the backbone of their operation. But it's not the only threat. They've integrated a fail-safe, a secondary control center hidden somewhere in the tunnels." Sarah leaned forward, her expression grim. "So even if we shut down the quantum computer, they could still launch their plan?" Amanda nodded. "Exactly. The fail-safe ensures their operation continues, no matter what happens. And there's another complication." She turned the laptop to face the group, showing a map of the city. "The Shadows have been using Ethan Miller's biometrics to access his father's AI protocols. If they complete their upload, they won't just create a shadow network, they'll overwrite legitimate systems." A chill settled over the room as Amanda's words sank in. John Harper, seated near the edge of the table, looked visibly shaken. "So everything they've done, the grave, the tunnels, the surveillance, it's all been leading to this?" "Yes," Amanda replied. "And if we don't stop them by midnight, they'll take control of the global financial infrastructure." Sergeant Matthews broke the silence. "Then we need to move now. We'll split into 2 teams, one to secure the quantum computer and the other to locate the fail-safe. If we take out both, they'll have no way to launch their attack." Sarah nodded. "I'll lead the team to the quantum computer. Max and I already know the layout, and we can use that to our advantage." "I'll go with you," Amanda added. "We'll need to disable the system from within." "Good," Matthews said, pointing to another officer. "Anderson, you'll take a second team into the tunnels to find the fail-safe. We've mapped out potential locations, but you'll need to rely on Max if you get off track. His instincts have been our best guide so far." John hesitated before speaking. "If it's all the same, I'd like to go with Maximum. I've worked these grounds for years. If there's something hidden in those tunnels, I'll know where to look." Matthews nodded. "Agreed. Let's move." As Sarah and her team descended into the tunnels leading to the command center, the weight of the task ahead pressed down on her. The narrow passageways felt more oppressive with each step, the air heavy with the hum of machinery. Max moved silently beside her, his every sense attuned to their surroundings. When they reached the command center, Amanda immediately got to work. Her fingers flew across her keyboard as she accessed the system. The quantum computer's interface glowed ominously, its central processor pulsing like a heartbeat. "They've activated the upload sequence," Amanda said, her voice tight. "We're running out of time." Sarah positioned herself near the entrance, her weapon drawn. "Can you stop it?" "I'm trying," Amanda replied, beads of sweat forming on her brow. "But their encryption is layered. Every second they gain makes this harder." Max suddenly growled, his eyes fixed on the monitors. Sarah followed his gaze and saw a live feed from the hospital. Two figures dressed in black were moving toward Ethan's room. Their intent clear. "They're going after Ethan," Sarah said, her voice sharp. She radioed Matthews, who was stationed above ground. "We've got a situation. They're targeting Ethan at the hospital." "Copy that," Matthews replied. "I'll dispatch a team immediately." Sarah turned back to Amanda. Her jaw clenched. "You focus on the computer. Max and I will hold the line here." Meanwhile, John and Anderson's team navigated the labyrinthine tunnels in search of the failsafe. John's flashlight illuminated faint markings on the walls, remnants of the cemetery's original design. Max led the way, his nose twitching as he picked up a scent. "This way," John said, pointing toward a passage that sloped downward. "If they've hidden a secondary control center, it'll be where the infrastructure is densest." As they moved deeper, the sound of rushing water grew louder, mingling with the hum of distant machinery. Finally, they emerged into a smaller chamber, its walls lined with servers. A single monitor displayed a countdown clock: 2 hours, 15 minutes. "That's it," Anderson said, moving quickly to secure the area. Max sniffed the perimeter, his ears flicking toward a faint noise. John noticed it too, a distant echo of voices. He signaled the others to stay quiet, his heart pounding as he crouched near the entrance. Moments later, 2 shadows operatives appeared, armed and unaware of the team's presence. Anderson acted quickly, issuing commands to disarm and detain them. The operatives resisted briefly but were subdued. Leaving the chamber secure, John turned to the monitor, his hands trembling slightly as he examined the setup. "This is it," he said. "But if we shut it down wrong, we could trigger their failsafe." Back at the command center, Amanda's voice came through the radio. "I'm in. I've disabled their main system, but the failsafe is still live. You've got to shut it down manually." John took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the controls. "Tell me what to do." Amanda's instructions came rapid fire, guiding him through the process. Max stayed close, his presence grounding John as he worked. The clock ticked down, each second a reminder of how little time they had. When the final command was entered, the countdown froze, the servers powered down, and the chamber went silent. "It's done," John said, his voice thick with relief. Above ground, Sarah and Amanda emerged from the tunnels, their mission complete. The Shadow's operation had been dismantled, their network severed before it could cause irreparable damage. Maximum, his paws bandaged but his spirit unbroken, stood proudly beside them. His role had been vital at every step, his loyalty and instincts saving lives and unraveling a conspiracy far larger than any of them had imagined. As the first light of dawn broke over Harbor Heights, the cemetery returned to its quiet serenity. But for those who had been part of the mission, the events of the past days would remain a reminder of the power of trust, determination, and the unbreakable bond between a dog and those who believed in him. The morning after the Shadow's plans had been dismantled, Harbor Hills Cemetery was bathed in a golden light that seemed almost symbolic. The battle that had played out in its underground tunnels had finally ended, and the peace above ground was a stark contrast to the chaos that had threatened not just Harbor Heights, but the entire world. For the first time in days, the cemetery was quiet, not with the eerie stillness of tension, but the serene calm of a place that had found resolution. Max lay on the cool grass near the chapel, his bandaged paws stretched out in front of him. Despite his visible exhaustion, his eyes were sharp and alert, scanning the horizon. Sarah Collins sat beside him, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. She had spent the night replaying the events in her mind, the discovery of the underground command center, the tension of disabling the quantum computer, and the moment when John Harper's steady hands had stopped the failsafe countdown. "You know," Sarah said softly, scratching behind Max's ears, "we couldn't have done any of this without you." Max tilted his head slightly, as if he understood her words. His unwavering loyalty and instincts had guided them through every step of the operation. From the moment he first barked at Ethan Miller's grave to the final moments in the tunnels. Sarah's admiration for him ran deep, and she couldn't help but feel grateful for the bond they had formed. Sergeant Matthews approached. His usual stern demeanor softened by a hint of a smile. "Collins," he said, nodding toward Maximum, "you've got quite the partner there. Not many can say they've helped prevent a global crisis." Sarah chuckled, patting Max's side. "He's not just a partner. He's a hero." Nearby, John Harper was carefully documenting the damage to the cemetery's eastern wall. But his focus wasn't entirely on his work. His mind kept drifting to the events of the past few days. For years, he had thought of himself as simply the caretaker of Harbor Hills, a quiet steward of its history. Now, he realized he had played a pivotal role in something far greater. When Amanda Rivera joined them later that morning, she carried with her a portable hard drive containing everything the cybercrimes unit had extracted from the Shadows system. The data was a treasure trove of information, plans, communications, and encrypted files that revealed the organization's reach and ambitions. It was clear that the Shadows had been operating for years, embedding themselves into critical infrastructure worldwide. "We've handed everything over to federal authorities," Amanda explained. "It'll take time to unravel, but we've given them a starting point." Sarah nodded. "What about Ethan? He's recovering," Amanda said. "Doctors say he's stable, and his father's flown in to be with him. Martin Miller is already working with the FBI to strengthen the AI protocols the Shadows tried to exploit." The mention of Ethan brought a wave of emotions over Sarah. She hadn't had the chance to speak with him since his rescue, but she couldn't shake the image of him in that casket. His survival was nothing short of miraculous, and she hoped he would find some sense of peace after everything he had endured. Later that day, Sarah and John visited Ethan at the hospital. The young man was pale and frail, but his eyes held a spark of determination. Maximum, as always, stayed close to Sarah's side, his presence a source of comfort. Ethan smiled weakly when he saw the dog, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's the reason I'm here," Ethan said. "If it weren't for him, I don't think I'd have made it." Max nudged Ethan's hand gently, his warm eyes meeting the young man's. Sarah couldn't help but smile at the exchange, her heart swelling with pride for Max and the role he had played. Martin Miller, Ethan's father, entered the room a few moments later. His normally composed demeanor was tinged with gratitude and emotion as he shook Sarah's hand. "Thank you," Martin said, "for everything. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "It wasn't just me," Sarah replied, glancing at Maximum. "We had the best help we could ask for." Martin crouched beside Maximum, scratching the dog's chin. "Then I owe you, too," he said softly. "You saved my son." As the days passed, the sense of urgency began to give way to reflection. The cemetery returned to its quiet routine, but the events of the past week left a lasting mark on the community. Word of Max's heroism spread quickly, and people from all over Harbor Heights came to the cemetery to meet the dog who had played a role in stopping the Shadows. In recognition of Max's bravery, Martin Miller made an announcement: he would fund the construction of a community center and veterinary hospital in Harbor Heights. The facility, named in Max's honor, would provide care for service animals and retired working dogs like him. John Harper, too, found himself reflecting on the importance of his role. The discovery of the underground tunnels and their connection to the Shadows network had changed his perspective on the cemetery. It was more than a resting place for the dead, it was a vital piece of the town's history. And now, a symbol of resilience. One evening, as Sarah and Max walked the perimeter of the cemetery, they paused near the chapel. The stained glass windows caught the fading light of the sunset, casting a kaleidoscope of colors on the ground. Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything they had accomplished. "Maximum," she said, crouching beside him, You've shown all of us what it means to be loyal, brave, and unyielding. I don't think anyone will ever forget what you've done." Max let out a soft sigh, his eyes scanning the horizon. For him, the work was never done. But in that moment, Sarah knew he was content, knowing that he had made a difference. Harbor Heights began to heal in the days following the unraveling of the Shadows operation. The cemetery at Harbor Hills, once a silent witness to the events, now stood as a symbol of resilience. Life returned to its gentle rhythms. Yet for those involved in the ordeal, the lessons learned and the bonds formed were indelible. Max became a local hero, and it wasn't long before stories of his bravery circulated far beyond Harbor Heights. Visitors flocked to the cemetery not just to honor their loved ones but to see the dog who had uncovered a conspiracy and saved countless lives. Yet, for Maximum, life remained as simple and purposeful as ever. His patrols of the cemetery resumed, his gait slower due to his healing pause, but his vigilance undiminished. John Harper watched Max with quiet admiration as the dog made his rounds. For John, the events had reshaped his understanding of his role. The cemetery was no longer just a place to maintain and protect, it was a space alive with meaning and memory. He had always thought of himself as a steward of the past. But now he saw himself as part of a living legacy. One crisp morning, John was approached by Martin Miller, who had returned to Harbor Heights to finalize plans for the community center and veterinary hospital he was funding in Max's honor. Martin carried a small leather-bound journal, which he handed to John with a look of deep gratitude. "This is for you," Martin said. "It's Ethan's account of everything that happened. He insisted on writing it himself. He wanted to thank you and Maximum." John opened the journal, his rough hands carefully turning the pages. Ethan's words were raw and heartfelt, recounting his ordeal with clarity and courage. He wrote of his gratitude for Maximum, who had refused to give up on him, and for John, whose steadfast care for the cemetery had unknowingly preserved the clues that led to his rescue. Tears welled in John's eyes as he closed the journal. "Tell him thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It means more than he knows." At the police station, Sarah Collins was finishing her report on the operation. The weight of the past week lingered in her mind, but there was also a profound sense of pride. She had always believed in the importance of her work. But Max had shown her something more, how loyalty and instinct could surpass even the most advanced training. As she typed the final sentences of her report, her phone buzzed with a message from Amanda Rivera. The Cybercrimes Unit had made a breakthrough in decoding the Shadows network. The organization had left behind fragments of their operations in other cities, providing valuable leads for authorities worldwide. Amanda's message ended with a simple note: "We made a difference." Sarah looked at Maximum, who lay stretched out on a blanket beside her desk, his ears twitching as he dozed. "We did, didn't we?" she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Harbor Heights Community Center and Veterinary Hospital was held a week later. The entire town gathered to celebrate, their collective pride and gratitude evident in every handshake and kind word exchanged. The facility, named the Max Center, was designed to provide free care for service animals and offer training programs for working dogs. Sarah stood with Max at her side as Martin Miller spoke at the podium. He recounted the events of the past weeks, emphasizing the critical role Max had played. "This center," Martin said, "is a tribute to a hero who reminds us that loyalty and courage can change the world. Max didn't just save my son, he showed all of us the power of instinct, trust, and heart." When the applause erupted, Max remained humble, his head tilted as if unsure why so many people were clapping. Sarah knelt beside him, whispering, "You deserve every bit of this, buddy." The highlight of the ceremony came when Ethan Miller, now fully recovered, presented Max with a medal. The young man's hands trembled slightly as he fastened it to Max's collar, his eyes glistening with emotion. "You saved me," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "And I'll never forget it." Max nuzzled Ethan gently, a silent acknowledgement of the bond between them. Life in Harbor Heights gradually settled into a new normal. But the community carried the lessons of the ordeal with them. The cemetery became a place not just of remembrance but of quiet inspiration. Visitors often stopped to admire the new stained glass window in the chapel, which depicted Max standing tall among the headstones, his gaze fixed on the horizon. For Sarah, the experience deepened her appreciation for the unpredictability of her work and the strength of her partnership with Maximum. She continued her rounds with him, trusting his instincts more than ever. Every bark, every alert was met with the respect it deserved. For Max had proven time and again that he saw the world in ways no human could. John Harper, too, found new purpose in his work. His meticulous care for the cemetery now extended to preserving the story of Max and the shadows. He began hosting small gatherings for the community, sharing the tale of how a loyal dog and a team of determined individuals had uncovered a conspiracy and protected something far greater than themselves. One evening, as the sun set over the cemetery, Sarah and John walked the grounds together. Max trotted ahead, his silhouette outlined by the amber glow of the horizon. "He's something special, isn't he?" John said, his voice filled with admiration. Sarah smiled, watching Max sniff a patch of grass before moving on. "He's more than special. He's a reminder of what we're capable of when we trust each other." John nodded, his gaze following Max's movements. "You know, for all the years I've worked here, I never thought a dog would teach me the most important lesson." "And what's that?" Sarah asked. "That sometimes the simplest acts of loyalty and courage can have the greatest impact," John said. "And that heroes don't always walk on two legs." As Max turned to look back at them, his tail wagging gently, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. The events of the past weeks had tested them all, but they had emerged stronger, united by the quiet heroism of a dog whose heart was as boundless as the horizon. As the days turned into weeks, Harbor Heights found itself in a rhythm of recovery. The harrowing events surrounding the Shadows conspiracy had left their mark on everyone involved. But they also brought unexpected connections and a deeper understanding of the strength that came from unity. At the center of it all was Maximum, the quiet hero who had saved lives, uncovered secrets, and united a community. The story of Max's bravery spread far and wide, drawing visitors to Harbor Hills Cemetery from neighboring towns and beyond. Parents brought their children to meet the dog who had uncovered the Shadows plot. Some came to thank him personally, while others simply wanted to witness the site where such an extraordinary story had unfolded. Max took the attention in stride, his calm demeanor earning him even more admiration. For Sarah Collins, life had taken on a new clarity. She had always known her work as a police officer carried weight. But Max had shown her how much more there was to protecting a community. Every time she looked at him, she was reminded of the quiet strength and determination that had guided him and her through the most uncertain of times. One evening, Sarah sat on the steps of the chapel, watching Max as he patrolled the grounds. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. The cemetery, once a source of unease, now felt like a sacred place, a testament to the power of loyalty and courage. John Harper joined her, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed one to Sarah and sat beside her, letting out a tired sigh. "You know," he began, "I never thought this old cemetery would become a symbol for something so big." Sarah nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "It's strange, isn't it? How a place meant for peace and reflection ended up being the center of a battle." John chuckled softly. "Life has a way of surprising us like that." Their conversation drifted to lighter topics as the evening wore on, but the bond between them had deepened, forged by the events they had shared. Sarah appreciated John's quiet wisdom, his dedication to his work, and the way he had stepped up when the town needed him most. The Harbor Heights Community Center and Veterinary Hospital, lovingly dubbed the Max Center, quickly became a cornerstone of the town. Its sleek design and state-of-the-art facilities were a testament to Martin Miller's commitment to honoring the dog who had saved his son. The center provided free medical care for retired police dogs and service animals, as well as training programs for new canine units. The grand opening was attended by hundreds, including police officers, community leaders, and families who had benefited from the center's services. Sarah, standing with Max at her side, felt an overwhelming sense of pride as Martin spoke about the center's mission. "This is more than just a building," Martin said, addressing the crowd. "It's a reminder of the bond between humans and animals, of the loyalty and courage they show us every day. Max taught us what it means to stand together, to trust in each other, and to never give up." The crowd erupted into applause, but Maximum, ever humble, seemed more interested in the treats being handed to him by a group of children. Sarah laughed, crouching beside him. "You're the star, buddy. Don't let it go to your head." Ethan Miller, now fully recovered, had become a frequent visitor to Harbor Hills Cemetery. He often came alone, bringing a book or a notebook to sit quietly among the gravestones. The ordeal he had endured had left scars, some visible, others buried deep, but it had also given him a new appreciation for life. One afternoon, Sarah found Ethan sitting near the chapel, his notebook open on his lap. Maximum, as usual, had wandered over to greet him, and the two shared a quiet moment of connection. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked, taking a seat beside Ethan. He looked up with a faint smile. "Better," he said. "It's strange. I used to think I understood how fragile life was. But now I see it differently." Sarah nodded, understanding all too well. "It changes you, doesn't it? Going through something like that." Ethan closed his notebook and set it aside. "It does. But it also reminds you of what matters. People. Connections. Loyalty." He glanced at Maximum, who was stretched out in the grass. "I owe him everything." "We all do," Sarah said softly. Max's daily routine had evolved, but his commitment to the cemetery remained steadfast. He patrolled the grounds with John, who had taken to talking to him as though he were another staff member. Their companionship was heartwarming, a reminder of the bond that had formed during their shared journey. One morning, as the sun rose over Harbor Heights, John noticed something unusual. Max had stopped near the cemetery's eastern wall, his nose twitching. He barked once, his tail wagging. John approached, curious. There, tucked beneath a patch of ivy, was a small wooden box. Inside was a note, written in neat handwriting. "To Maximum, the hero of Harbor Heights. Thank you for reminding us that courage comes in all forms. You'll always have our gratitude." The note was unsigned, but John had a feeling it came from one of the many visitors who had come to the cemetery to honor Maximum. He read it aloud, his voice cracking slightly as he did. "You deserve this, buddy," he said, scratching Max's ears. "More than anyone." The story of Max and the shadows became a part of Harbor Heights history, passed down through families and commemorated in local events. The cemetery, once a quiet resting place, was now a symbol of resilience and unity. For Sarah, John, Ethan, and Martin, the events had forged a lasting bond. They often gathered at the cemetery or the Max Center, sharing stories, updates, and quiet moments of reflection. Max was always at the center of it all, his presence a constant reminder of the power of loyalty, love, and the unbreakable connections we forge in the face of adversity. As the seasons changed, the story of Maximum, the loyal German shepherd who uncovered a sinister plot and saved countless lives, became a cherished part of Harbor Heights' identity. His unwavering courage had not only exposed the Shadows' operation but also united a community, inspired trust, and reminded everyone of the profound lessons found in loyalty and love. The town flourished in the wake of the ordeal. The Max Center quickly became a hub of activity, offering more than just veterinary services. It became a gathering place where the community could reflect, celebrate, and continue the legacy Max had inspired. From its walls hung photos of working dogs in action, including a large portrait of Max with the medal Ethan Miller had given him. John Harper, whose quiet dedication had always defined his work, took on a new role as a storyteller. He often welcomed groups of schoolchildren to the cemetery, weaving the tale of Max and the shadows into lessons about resilience, empathy, and courage. One crisp autumn morning, John stood in the chapel, addressing a group of eager children and their parents. Maximum, now a little grayer around the muzzle but no less alert, lay at his feet, his eyes scanning the room as though ensuring everything was in order. Max didn't just uncover a grave, John began, his voice steady but warm. He uncovered a truth about all of us, that no matter how small we may feel, every one of us has the power to make a difference. The children leaned in, captivated by the story. Max's calm demeanor and gentle presence seemed to reassure them. And by the end of John's tale, many approached to pet him, their smiles wide with admiration. "Will Max keep guarding the cemetery forever?" one boy asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. John chuckled, scratching Max behind the ears. "As long as he wants to. And as long as we're lucky enough to have him." For Sarah Collins, the experience of working alongside Max had left a lasting impact. She carried the lessons of his instincts and loyalty into every case she handled, trusting her intuition more than ever. Her bond with Max had deepened into something she couldn't quite put into words, a partnership that transcended their work and had become a constant source of strength. One evening, Sarah brought Max to her small apartment after a long day. The soft glow of her desk lamp illuminated a half-written letter she'd been working on, her application for a program that trained handlers for canine units. "I don't know if I'll get in," she admitted to Maximum, who was sprawled contentedly on the rug. "But if I do, it'll be because of you." Max's tail thumped lazily against the floor, his eyes half closed as though offering his quiet approval. Sarah smiled, turning back to her letter. She wanted to carry forward the legacy Max had built, to help train the next generation of dogs and handlers who would protect their communities with the same dedication he had shown. Ethan Miller, too, had been profoundly changed by his experience. Though his recovery had been slow, he found solace in writing, using the journal he had started as a way to process the trauma and gratitude he felt. His father, Martin, encouraged him to speak publicly about his story, not to relive the pain but to inspire others to recognize the importance of connection, loyalty, and resilience. At a small community event hosted at the Max Center, Ethan shared his story for the first time. His voice was steady but filled with emotion as he recounted the moment he first saw Max standing over his grave, barking with a determination that had ultimately saved his life. "I'll never forget that sound," Ethan said, his gaze shifting to where Max lay beside Sarah. "It wasn't just a dog barking, it was hope. It was someone saying, 'I won't give up on you. And that's why I'm here today.'" The applause that followed was heartfelt, and Ethan left the stage to kneel beside Maximum, his hand resting gently on the dog's head. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, "for everything." Max nuzzled Ethan's hand in return, his quiet acknowledgement speaking volumes. As winter settled over Harbor Heights, the town seemed to embrace a renewed sense of purpose. The cemetery, blanketed in snow, exuded a peaceful beauty. Max continued his rounds with John, their partnership a familiar rhythm that brought comfort to both man and dog. On Christmas Eve, Sarah, Ethan, and Martin joined John and Max at the chapel for a quiet celebration. The stained glass windows glowed with the warm light of candles, casting colorful patterns on the wooden pews. They shared stories, laughter, and gratitude, their bond a testament to the power of unity in the face of adversity. As the evening drew to a close, Sarah knelt beside Maximum, her hand resting on his back. "You've brought us all together. You know that," she said softly. "You're not just a hero, you're family." Max's tail wagged gently, his gaze steady and calm. For him, the accolades and attention didn't matter. What mattered was the sense of purpose, the trust he shared with those around him, and the peace he had helped bring to a town that now felt whole again. The legacy of Max and the Shadow's downfall would live on, not just in Harbor Heights but in the lives of those who had been touched by the story. For John, Sarah, Ethan, and Martin, it was a reminder of what could be accomplished when people and animals came together with determination and heart. And for Maximum, the journey continued, one steady step at a time, as he patrolled the cemetery grounds with the same unwavering loyalty that had saved a life and inspired a community. As the sun set over Harbor Heights, casting a golden glow across the peaceful cemetery, Max stood at the heart of it all, a symbol of loyalty, courage, and unwavering determination. His story had touched not just the lives of those in the small town, but countless others who had heard of his extraordinary deeds. From uncovering a sinister plot to saving Ethan Miller's life, Max had proven that even in the darkest moments, a single act of bravery could inspire hope and bring people together. The town's gratitude was etched in every corner of the newly built Max Center, where his legacy continued to inspire and protect. For Sarah, John, Ethan, and Martin, the bonds they had forged during those tense days were a reminder of the strength found in unity and trust. As Max completed his final patrol of the evening, his eyes scanned the horizon, ever watchful. His journey had become a testament to the power of love and connection, proving that sometimes the greatest heroes walk on four legs. If Max's story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of courage and resilience. Join us in celebrating the extraordinary bonds that shape our lives, one story at a time.